在这个充满变数的时代，我相信没有任何一个国家能够独善其身、孤身前行。所以我们需要的不是筑墙自守，而是搭桥相连。
Small states like Singapore are not just helpless. We just don't sit there and wait for things to happen to us. We have agency, and Singapore has been grasping that initiative and agency.
The first is the continued expansion of domestic consumption. China has already set out a clear direction to advance policies that support a more balanced and sustainable growth model, with the services sector playing an increasingly important role. A vibrant services sector is key to China's next phase of high-quality development, and it also contributes to a more balanced global trading environment, which is a shared interest for all nations. The second area is the continued efforts to stabilize China's property market, which remains a priority for ensuring social harmony and long-term economic confidence. The Chinese government could consider repurposing some of the existing housing stock into affordable housing for young families and young people. Incentives can be offered as part of the housing subsidy package, as China, similar to Singapore, is also facing a challenge with low fertility. Such an approach will represent a win-win outcome. It supports a healthy adjustment of the property market while simultaneously improving intergenerational mobility and ensuring that the fruits of China's development are shared broadly across society. The third area is one that I touched on at last year's forum: the enduring importance of people-to-people and cultural exchanges among the younger generation.
关于 Manus 是2025年的4、5月份吧，离开了中国，搬到了新加坡，一直到中国政府对他采取了行动，这当中大概有8、9个月的时间。那这个时间，这些的知识产权也好，取得的技术进展也好，严格说来是在新加坡发生的。那新加坡政府有没有考虑过采取行动，保护新加坡公司的权益？那新加坡政府在这个事件当中全程保持沉默的原因是什么？
The reason why there was no need for the Singapore government to say anything about the case is because there was no Singapore law that was broken. Now, the Chinese government and the US government will have their own national security and strategic considerations, which we respect. We feel that it is important if we want to continue with this collaboration between countries, that we must understand and respect each other's priorities and considerations. But what Singapore will do is we want to establish ourselves as a trusted place for business and for finance. And to do that, I think disclosure is important, transparency is important, trust is important, and that is the direction that we will take.
Last 2 years is the unraveling of the rules-based order in the world. The openness of the world order institutions, which gave us our security and prosperity for the last 80 years, is being undermined. And most recently, we see sea lanes threatened too. Small states like Singapore are not just helpless. We just don't sit there and wait for things to happen to us. We have agency, and Singapore has been grasping that initiative and agency. We try to create a pathway for ourselves. Singapore reinvents itself at every crisis. We've shown that we can diversify our trade relationships, create new trade agreements. We've even formed this FITP, Freedom of Investment and Trade Partnership, which is a corridor, not the FTA, of countries from New Zealand to Chile, including Africa.
当然，我想对于咱们这个区域亚洲的国家来讲，最重要的是要防止新的冲突、新的战争。那么我上个礼拜呢，在韩国，我们在讨论朝鲜半岛的问题，这也是让人很担忧的一个趋势，就是现在日本和韩国呀，都有一些声音要去拥核啊，拥有核武器。所以呢，我想呢，在美国采取一种所谓的 retrenchment 的背景之下呀，其他国家怎么样去应对美国和中国这样一些新的角色，他们的战略调整，实际上也是中国外交面临的一个挑战。就是不要以为好像美国收缩了，这个其他国家不会采取新的行动。刚才陈大使讲到这个 agency， 所以接下来我们要看到一个更加复杂的这个亚太地区的安全格局。
So it is the wrong question to ask if we are asking ourselves when the Straits of Hormuz will return back to normal. Yeah, it's going to be a new normal, right? And that new normal, as far as Iran and Oman are concerned, is going to involve some kind of feed. In relation to the future of the Straits is also an increase in activity in terms of the creation of alternative supply routes for the flow of energy. Yeah. So in Saudi Arabia, they are accelerating the East-West corridor in order to use the Red Sea. So there are a number of these initiatives that had already been started before the war, but the various actors are doubling down and accelerating it. Yeah? And that actually creates a lot of opportunities in terms of infrastructure development. Yeah? And I know whether it's Chinese companies, Singaporean companies, etc., already sort of eyeing that.
最后呢，我想强调，东南亚呢不应该成为大国竞争的棋盘。但是过去几年的这个经验告诉我们呢，这个未来的危机啊，很可能不是等旧的危机解决以后再发生的，很可能是同时发生的。那么目前美伊冲突会不会在美国中期选举后重启？那么美国会不会继续这个吞并格陵兰？导致美欧危机加剧，南海、台海是否会因为擦枪走火而骤然升级？我觉得没有人能够给出答案。那么，我觉得东盟国家必须要保持警惕。